Hey, welcome to Life After Nursing School. I'm your host, Caroline Dana, aka Nurse Coach Caroline, and I'm here to help you, the new nurse, thrive in your career. As a former nurse recruiter, nurse manager, and now your personal new nurse career coach, I'm obsessed with making sure you don't just survive your first couple of years at the bedside. I want you to absolutely rock them. From the challenges to the triumphs, I'll be right here with you, giving you the real-world advice and support that you need to shine. Whether you're in nursing school getting ready for life after, or you're already out there in nurse life feeling overwhelmed or even questioning your confidence, I've got your back. I'll be sharing tips, tricks, resources, and strategies that are just for you. We'll dive into everything from landing that dream nursing job to slaying imposter syndrome, and most importantly, how to keep that spark alive and stay the vibrant and amazing nurse that you are. So if you're ready to tackle the things nursing school did not cover, like how to build a career, trust yourself, and keep your passion strong, then get comfortable because we are about to dive in and make nurse life the best life. Welcome back. As I was brainstorming a topic for this week's episode, I always try to keep in mind that my goal for this podcast is to be a place that you can turn to elevate your career in some shape or form. Maybe you gain advice that helps you handle a challenging coworker. Maybe you learn a hack that you can implement into your workflow every shift. Maybe you listen to an episode and you just simply feel validated on something that you've been feeling or struggling with. Whatever it is, I want this podcast to help you and to add value to your nursing career. We live in a very tough healthcare climate. The working conditions are so high stress and rigorous, but I really want to remain a positive voice in our profession because honestly, I find there are so many negative ones out there. And while I would change a lot about our working conditions, I also know that I don't have a magic wand. So instead, I find that my energy and the best way I can contribute to our profession as a whole is to help you and every nurse that listens to the show decide on how you want to use your nursing license. And I want you to use it in a way that adds value to your life. Yes, nursing is stressful, but there are so many different opportunities and different working conditions and different environments that we can work in that if one doesn't suit you, time to move on to the next. So today's episode encompasses 10 tough love messages that I think you and I need to hear from time to time so that we stop playing safe or playing small. It might be time for you to pivot. And I get it, change is scary. We often tell ourselves these narratives that keep us stuck and keep us where we are. But today, I want to give you some tough love in the best way possible. Think of me as your big sister on the unit as I share with you 10 tough love messages that are hard truths and might even sting a little, but also could set you free. These are lessons that I've learned the hard way in my nursing career, and I promise you they will save you energy, time, and stress if you take them to heart. But before we dive in, I know you know what I'm going to say here. Please do me a favor and rate the show. I swear I will literally love you forever. Okay, the first tough love message that you need to hear is you can't want it for someone more than they want it for themselves. Okay, should I say it louder for the people in the back? You can't want it for someone more than they actually want it for themselves. When I was a brand new nurse, I used to pour so much time and energy into convincing my patients who wanted to leave AMA, which is against medical advice, and I would try to convince them to stay. I would negotiate, educate, plead with them because I thought if I just explained things well enough, they'd change their mind. But after about a year of being a nurse, I transitioned to the ER. And once I got down into the ER, I learned very quickly that there's simply no time for that. If someone doesn't want care, even care that is medically necessary, you can explain why it's important, but at the end of the day, the choice is theirs. Respect it, let it go, and save your energy. I found I was far less drained once I stopped trying to carry that responsibility on my shoulders. And let me be clear, this isn't solely the nurse's job anyway. If a patient is determined to leave, the physician needs to step in and have the conversation too, okay? Our role is to educate, advocate, and support, but we don't have time to beg. And this is just one example of you wanting it for someone else more than they want it for themselves, but this one just quickly came to mind. And I also want to share that this message hits me on a personal level too. If you've listened to the show before, you may know that my dad passed away from lung cancer in 2015. Growing up, I begged him for years to quit smoking. When he turned 50, I wrote him a lengthy letter asking him to quit. And honestly, that's what finally made him quit. But spoiler alert, it was too late. My dad ended up passing away at the age of 57. After he passed away, I struggled so much with anger. I would catch myself thinking, why didn't he quit sooner? Why didn't he listen to us all those years before? But the truth is, that line of thinking is just energy moving in the wrong direction. And if you've ever loved someone that struggles with addiction, you know exactly what I mean. From the outside, it makes no sense. But on the inside, they're battling their own demons. The reality is, wanting someone to choose the healthier path more than they do doesn't change anything. It only leaves you feeling emotionally drained, resentful, and exhausted. That's where I have found comfort in the Mel Robbins let them theory. Let them figure it out. Let them make their own choices. And most importantly, let me set boundaries and let go of trying to control the outcome. In fact, I recorded an entire episode about how the let them theory applies to nursing. And if this resonates with you, I highly recommend checking it out. It's such a freeing concept. It's episode 30, the unique mindset shift every nurse needs to beat stress and burnout, the let them theory. Okay, moving on to the second tough love message that you need to hear, and that is consistency is key to mastery. I don't know a single nurse or really anyone who tried something for the very first time and immediately felt confident like an expert or a pro. That's just not how growth works. Every new task takes repetition and practice. The more reps that you put in, the faster you move through that scary, uncomfortable beginner phase and toward real mastery. Let me share an embarrassing story with you. When I was a senior in nursing school, we had just learned how to start IVs in lab, okay? Of course, we practiced on mannequin arms, which are nothing like real life people and real life limbs. So naturally, I had this brilliant idea to try an IV on my then boyfriend, now husband, Brian, at my apartment. Brian gathered a few supplies. I brought a few of my own, including, yes, an expired needle. This is hilarious. Why did I do this? And thought I had this in the bag. Like honestly, my husband has the most gorgeous, big, beautiful veins in his arms. So I figured this would be so easy. Spoiler alert, it was not easy. His vein kept rolling. I missed. And eventually I had to call it quits. Brian was such a good sport about it, but he ended up developing phlebitis and actually needed antibiotics. I was mortified. I'll never forget us going to dinner with his parents a few days later, and it was a sweltering spring day, and Brian wore a long sleeve shirt to cover his arm. And his mom kept asking, "Why are you wearing long sleeves? You must be roasting." Meanwhile, I was dying inside. Fast forward a few years, and I spent most of my bedside career in the ER where placing IVs was part of my daily bread and butter. Over time, I became really skilled at starting even the trickiest of lines. When I later moved into my nurse manager role, one of my favorite things to do was to get out on the floor and help my staff by placing those tough IVs. They didn't have to wait for IV therapy, and instead I felt a little bit like a hero. Not only did it give me a chance to stay connected to the work, but it also felt great to take a stressful task off of their list. And that's what consistency does. I went from botching my first attempt on my poor husband to being a go-to IV nurse in the ER. And it wasn't magic and it wasn't luck. It was simply repetition. Practice really does make progress. So if you're scared or uncomfortable doing something new, remind yourself that feeling doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you're new. The choice is yours also, okay? You can avoid these uncomfortable tasks and drag out that beginner stage of feeling uncomfortable, or you can lean in, seek out those opportunities and just move through it faster. Get those reps in. The next tough love message that I think you need to hear is fake it till you make it is actually real. Now, let me clarify. I am not saying you should ever fabricate answers as a nurse or pretend to know something that you don't. That's seriously unsafe practice and just terrible practice in general. But what I am saying is that you can and should practice confidence, even if you're shaking in your boots on the inside. Confidence is partly a learned behavior, and the way you carry yourself matters. Your patients will pick up on your confidence or your lack of it almost instantly. When you appear calm and assured, your patients trust you more. On the flip side, if you seem uncertain, nervous, or hesitant, they'll start to question not only what you're saying, but also your ability as their nurse. Here's the good news. Even if you're new, there are things you can genuinely feel confident about. You can be confident in your ability to find the answer to a patient's question. You can be confident that your patient will feel heard because you'll take the time to listen. You can be confident that you'll advocate for them to the best of your ability. And with time and repetition, that practiced confidence becomes real. Slowly, you'll build genuine confidence in the areas that you feel shaky right now, whether that's a task or a situation or a tough interaction. So, yes, fake it till you make it is real, because if you show up with confidence today, you're creating the path to your true confidence tomorrow. Next tough love message that you need to hear is stop comparing yourself to others. I know this is easier said than done, but here's the truth. Very rarely does comparison actually make you feel good. Most of the time, when we're seeking out comparison, it's because we're feeling insecure about where we are. We're letting those insecurities take the driver's seat. And in nursing, especially, it's a trap. We all have different strengths, different experiences, different starting points. Comparing yourself to someone else's level of achievement is like comparing apples to oranges. Sure, they're both fruit, but they're wildly different. I've caught myself in this trap so many times before. In high school, when I joined the cross country team my senior year, I constantly compared myself to the girls who were faster than me. I'd get frustrated because they seemed so far ahead. What I failed to recognize back then was that they had been running distance for years. Meanwhile, it was my very first season, and somehow I still managed to claim the number 3 spot on our team. But instead of celebrating that, I was stuck comparing myself to the runners who had a completely different level of experience. And this still happens as an adult. In my business, there are months when I feel so behind, like I'm not moving fast enough or achieving enough. And then out of nowhere, someone will say to me, wow, I am so impressed by your progress. Or how do you do it? How did you get this far into business? Those comments snap me out of it and remind me how far I've actually come. The truth is, there will always be more skills to master and goals to chase, but the only meaningful comparison is to yourself, your own growth and your own progress. I recently read a quote that stuck with me. Remember, where you are now is where someone else is dreaming to be. And that really hit me because when I look back, there are things I never would have imagined, like being featured on Jenna Kutcher's podcast or having the courage to even start this podcast. But here we are. Everything is relative, and every step forward, every leap of faith makes the next one easier. The first step will always be the scariest, but once you take it, you realize you're more capable than you thought. So stop comparing yourself to everyone else's chapter 20 when you're on chapter 2. Look at how far you've come and use that as proof that you are still moving forward. The next tough love message that you need to hear is failure is not what you think it is. In my opinion, there's really only one true definition of failure, and that is simply giving up, quitting, and that's it. Mistakes, errors, missteps, and pivots, those are not failures. They're lessons. They're feedback. They're learning moments. And the reality is we cannot learn without trying. And when we try something new, we're not going to get it perfect every time, especially in the beginning, and that is okay. In nursing, there are plenty of situations where you mess something up once and you think to yourself, never again. I'll give you an example. Early in my career, I was irrigating a 3-way Foley catheter after a prostate surgery for a patient. The catheter was clogged. Typically, it can clog with blood clots, okay? And this patient was in extreme pain because their bladder was full of irrigation fluid and that fluid had nowhere to go. So I pushed the irrigation so hard. I was trying to forcefully irrigate it so I could open up that track and allow that fluid to pass. But I pushed so hard that I ended up squirting the irrigation fluid out the sides of the Foley and all over me, okay? And listen, I can tell myself that it was just irrigation fluid, but let's be honest, it was a mix of urine, blood, and clots. And yes, some irrigation fluid. From that day forward, though, I swore I'd never irrigate another catheter without full PPE because lesson learned. Another time, early in my ER days, I almost administered cardizem instead of an antibiotic. Both were in the same Advantage IV bag and they looked identical and they were in the same pocket of the Pyxis. So when I was in the Pyxis, I pulled the wrong one out. And as I was walking to a patient's room, my coworker, and let me just say, not my just average coworker, actually my manager at the time, stopped and said, whoa, who are we giving cardizem to? Because of course that is a high risk medication and likely a patient that is taking up a ton of our resources and is very unstable. And at that moment I froze. I looked at the label and I realized, oh my gosh, I was about to give a high risk medication thinking it was a simple antibiotic. The shock, the embarrassment, and the relief all at once hit me. And from that moment on, I made myself a promise, never ever rely on appearance alone. Always read the label. And of course, I was going to barcode scan because I'm a big cheerleader for barcode scanning your medications. So I think to myself, hopefully that would have also alerted me to this medication. But to think how close I had came to administering that med still leaves me shaking on the inside. But those moments, they're not failures. My manager was not mad at me. He actually arced this up to our safety committee, and we ended up putting that cardizem medication in its own pocket in the Pyxis by itself. So look, these are lessons learned. They made me a better, safer nurse, and failure would have been quitting after those mistakes. But because I kept going, those experiences became part of my growth, part of my practice. So the next time you catch yourself thinking you've failed, stop and reframe it. Did you actually quit? Or did you just learn something the hard way? Because if you're still moving forward, you have not failed at all. Tough love message number 6. This is one I do think you need to hear, and it's something I still struggle with. Focus on the things that you can control. This one hits close to home because honestly, I am still a work in progress here. My husband calls me out on it all the time. I have a tendency to get about 10 steps ahead of reality, assuming how things are going to play out and what people will say and how the situation will unfold. And I will already be stressed about it before it even happens. When I was a nurse manager, this showed up constantly. I used to call my mom, who also was a nurse manager before she retired, and I would call her completely upset after meetings with upper leadership. I'd leave those meetings so frustrated about these new initiatives that I was told to prioritize and things that, in my opinion, didn't actually move the needle for patient care or positively impact the staff at all. And I'd vent to my mom about how pointless it all felt and how I was going to use all my energy. And she'd always say, do not let it get to you because we both know this initiative is not going to work out. And then she'd tell me, sure, share your concerns or your reservations professionally, and then let it play out. And she was always right. She'd remind me that my job wasn't to fight leadership on every decision. It was to advocate for my team, voice my concerns respectfully, and then step back and let the chips fall where they may. Fighting the system endlessly was just draining my energy, and it didn't change the outcome. Even now, outside of management, I still catch myself doing this. Again, I'll call my husband upset about something, and I'm already 3 steps ahead of what's actually happening, assuming that I know how people will react. And he'll say, babe, you're not even there yet. Focus on what's in front of you. And he's right too, because when we spend our energy trying to control the things that are outside of our control, like people's opinions, outcomes, decisions, we lose focus on what is within our control, our effort, our response, our attitude. So if you're like me and you tend to spiral into the what ifs, try pausing and asking yourself, is this something that I can actually control right now? And if the answer is no, let it go. Save your energy for something that you can influence, because that's where your power actually lies. Tough love message number 7 that I think you need to hear, and is you will outgrow people, places, and opportunities. And that's actually a good thing. It means you're evolving. There was a time when people stayed in the same job for 20, 30, 40 years. But most of those nurses were from a different generation. Baby boomers who didn't have the options and flexibility that we have today. Our generation of nurses has the ability to pivot, to explore, to find roles that fit the season of life that we're in. And that's one of the most incredible things about the profession. I learned this the hard way after earning my MSN in nursing leadership and management in 2018. Shortly after, I stepped into my first management role. On paper, it was perfect. I finally landed the job that I worked so hard for. I loved my unit. I loved my staff. I was making the most money that I'd ever made as a nurse. I had weekends and holidays off so I could be with my kids. By all external measures, I'd finally made it. But inside, I felt trapped. The job that looked so good on paper felt like prison in real life. My days were packed with so much admin work that it kept me locked in my office instead of out on the floor with my team. I was being called all hours of the night, on weekends, on holidays, on vacations. I remember one trip to the Outer Banks. Our family went with 3 other families. And we rented this big house on the water. It was so fun. And it was supposed to be relaxing, fun, and a break from reality. But My phone did not stop ringing with staffing issues. I felt guilty because I could tell that the person covering my unit wasn't truly advocating for my staff, but honestly, she had her own impossible workload as a manager. So how could I expect her to give that same energy to my floor as well? But the truth was, I couldn't lead the way that I wanted to in management. Upper management wanted me to focus on things like bedside report audits and updating the whiteboards and leadership rounding, things that look good on spreadsheets but didn't actually do anything or move the needle in patient care. That chapter of my life was full on stress. I was constantly running from work to daycare to kids' activities to appointments. Weekends were packed with all the chores that I didn't have time to do during the week, and my cortisol level was just through the roof. I felt like I was putting out fires everywhere, at work and at home. I was not the best version of myself. I wasn't patient, I wasn't present, and I wasn't happy. My husband and I spent so much time arguing about who would call out for a sick kid and who would make it to an appointment. And we relied heavily on our support system. Our moms, like my mom and his mom, helped us constantly, and they still do, but not to the level that they did during this time. And while I was grateful, I was also feeling so incredibly guilty. I had built this career that looked amazing on paper, but in reality, it was burning me from both ends. Eventually, I had to face the truth. This wasn't the life that I wanted. This wasn't the person that I wanted to be, and my soul felt trapped. But in hindsight, that feeling wasn't a failure. It was evolution. I had outgrown that version of the career in that chapter of my life. And if you're in a season right now where something looks good on paper but doesn't feel good in your heart, that's your sign that you've grown, you've evolved, and it's okay to want something different. It doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It means you're ready for what is next. The next tough love message is harsh, but it is one that I think you need to hear. You are replaceable. And that's actually a good thing. I know that sounds blunt, but I'm sharing it because I had to learn it for myself. For a long time, I believed that I was not replaceable, that if I left a job, my boss would beg me to stay, ask me what went wrong, and it would be somewhat devastating, which is kind of funny looking back, but that's actually not what happened. Every job that I left, they were, of course, sad to see me go, but then the unit kept moving. The department kept going on, and they would hire someone else, and life continued on. At first, that was really hard for me to swallow, but over time, I realized it was actually freeing. If a job or a friend group is no longer serving you, it's okay to leave. It's okay to pivot. The world isn't going to stop, and that's exactly why you don't have to stop either. Knowing that you're replaceable takes the pressure off. It means you're allowed to listen to your heart and move on when it's time. You don't owe it to anyone to stay stuck in a place that no longer fits you. This next tough love message number 9, piggybacks off of the previous one, and it's one you do need to hear, and that's you shouldn't worry about disappointing others more than disappointing yourself. And it sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest lessons to learn, especially for nurses, because we're natural people pleasers. We care deeply, we want to be team players, and we don't like letting anyone down. But here's the reality. Are you really willing to stay in a job that's making you miserable just because you don't want to disappoint your manager or your coworkers? If so, I mean, that does say a lot, not just about your sense of loyalty, but maybe about your boss too, because a great leader should also want what's best for you, even if that means you're growing beyond their team. But more importantly, it's a reminder that you can't prioritize someone else's expectations for your life over your own. When you stay in a role or a situation just to keep someone else happy, you're slowing down your own growth. You're delaying the next version of yourself that's waiting on the other side of fear or guilt. I will say, I have never regretted leaving a position. In the moment, it can be scary and hard, and you might be thinking, am I doing the right thing? Maybe my boss has these grand plans for me and my growth, but every single pivot I have made has been closer to a more aligned life and has made me so happy that I have pivoted. So if it's time to move on, stop trying to prevent the inevitable. You owe it to yourself to choose the path that aligns with your growth and your peace. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with your choices, not your boss, not your coworkers, not anyone else. All right. So this brings me to the last tough love message that you need to hear. And it is, no one is watching you as closely as you're watching yourself. We spend so much time worrying about what other people might think. But the truth is, everyone else is too busy living their own lives to focus closely on yours. Most of the time, the people you think that are paying attention aren't even noticing. They're caught up in their own stories, just like you are. I recently read a quote that said, "We're the leading character in our own life, but we're just supporting or background characters in everyone else's." And it's true. Everyone is focused on the main character of their own story, which is themselves. I had to learn this lesson the hard way when I started posting on social media. It was terrifying at first. I worried constantly about what people would think. I'd imagine old coworkers or friends from high school judging me, rolling their eyes, or talking about what I was doing. But deep down, I knew that if I wanted to build a successful business and truly connect with other nurses, I had to put myself out there. And guess what? Some of the very people that I was scared would judge me actually ended up being incredibly supportive. They commented on my posts, sent encouraging messages, and told me how inspired they were by what I was doing. It was a reminder that most of the stories we tell ourselves about what people might think are that. They're just stories. We are honestly our own harshest critic. And even if Jessica from high school does see your post and has an opinion, who cares? If she feels some type of way about it, that's hers to unpack, not yours. Not putting yourself out there because you're afraid of what someone might think is giving that imaginary person power over your life. And honestly, they don't deserve it. So the next time you hesitate to take a step forward, remind yourself, no one's paying as much attention as you think that they are. So do it anyway. So there you have it. 10 tough love lessons or messages that every nurse needs to hear. They're the truths that might sting a little bit at first, but they're the ones that will help you grow the most. Whether it's learning to let go of what you can't control, pushing through discomfort to reach mastery, or realizing it's okay to outgrow people and opportunities, every one of these lessons is rooted in experience, growth, and evolution. My hope is that you take these reminders and use them as fuel to step into the next season of yourself and your life and your career with confidence. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to keep showing up, keep learning, and keep choosing yourself even when it's hard. Because at the end of the day, this career and this life are yours to shape. If today's episode resonates with you, I'd love it if you rated and reviewed the show. You know, it helps me find more nurses and helps nurses find this kind of content and reminds me that these conversations are making an impact. And as always, remember, I have one hand for me and the other for you. Signing off. Well, that's it for today's episode of Life After Nursing School. I hope you feel more confident and ready to tackle the challenges that come with starting your nursing career. Remember, the first year or two might not be easy, but with the right mindset, you can overcome anything. If you found value in today's episode, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. Also, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps so much in reaching other new nurses like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, you've got this. Take care and see you next time.